Hi, it's Michelle from Bits and Pieces Paper Lab. I love to make cards with my Cricut. So if you love to make cards as well, let's be friends. Today we're going to make this cute bobblehead Nutcracker Slimline card. Super fun. So I'm going to show you how to create this and what we're using for the bobblehead. And then you can create a bunch of your own, make your own little army. So let's jump into the software. I have just a few things to show you before we are ready to get started.
Just one little tip in case you aren't familiar with using score lines in the Cricut Design Space software. When you open this file, you'll see that the fold that is intended to be the score line for the Slimline is actually a cut line. So if you were to just hit make it, this would cut right in half. So we're going to click on the file, come up here to these two little boxes and hit ungroup. And that just starts to release the pieces from the base of the card. And then we're going to come over here on the right side. I'm selecting the card. We're going to come over here on the right side and I'm going to click this little arrow. So this shows me this is a grouped item. If I click this little arrow, it shows me everything that is in the grouping. So I'm going to click on this line because that is supposed to be a score line, not a cut line. Then I'm going to come up here at the top under Operation. On the drop down, I'm going to choose Score. That's going to turn it to a score line. So if you have a score tool, it will do that for you. If you don't have a score tool, you can just delete this and it will, and just fold it yourself. So whichever you want to do. So now that I've got that added, I need to tell the software that I want that score line placed exactly where I have it on the screen when it cuts. So I'm going to come over here again. I'm going to select the top grouping, which now I've got both the score line and the card base selected. I'm going to come down here and click attach. And that just tells the software that I want those two items to stay together. Now, one more thing, we're going to come over here and click our little character. We're going to ungroup him and move his head out of the way. And we're going to work specifically with this bottom piece, this little stand. You can see there's a cut line right here as well. I want that to be a cut line. It's kind of a decorative element. You can see it doesn't extend all the way to the edges, so it's more just supposed to be like kind of a decorative cut. So it's grouped. I'm going to come over here. Same thing. I'm going to click on the little arrow so I can see the grouping. I can see my little line and I can see the base. I want to make sure Cricut knows that I want these two items to cut the line and the base exactly where I have them on the screen. So I'm going to come up here and select the grouping. That selects both the line and the base and come down here and hit attach. And then now when it cuts, it will cut that little line right on that base piece. All right, I think that's it. Let's go ahead and hit make it and get ready to cut all of this out.
All right, so we are ready to start assembling. And for my sample card, I did traditional Christmas colors like gold and red and green. And for this one we're going to assemble today, I've done the non-traditional Christmas palette that's so popular, the mint and the pink. So you can choose whatever you want. You can actually make, several of them and just mix and match different color palettes. So as you can see, this project has quite a few pieces. I actually love to paper piece, to put glue little pieces of paper together. I think it's so relaxing. But even if you don't love it, I promise you it's worth it. It's not as overwhelming as it looks. So let's begin and I'll show you how to get this assembled. Let's first begin with the face because I think that's probably the most pieces are on the face. So let's just get that out of the way first. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is this background piece is the kind of like a base to put all the face pieces and the hat and everything on. So I'm going to first glue on my little peach face, and this just gets lined up along the bottom of the circle, just like that. And then next, let's do his little mouth. And this is just going to go along the bottom. And honestly, his mustache covers up most of it, but it does peek out from the bottom. So I like to use Barely Arts glue. This has a precision fine tip applicator. You can see how tiny that is. And so for small pieces like this, it's really handy because you can strategically place your glue on tiny little things. And this cut piece, you might notice it's very small. I actually love Encore cardstock from 12 by 12 Cardstock Shop. it cuts really great. And so you can cut tiny little details like that. Now, if your cardstock isn't cutting that detailed, you could just leave the center piece out and just cut a square. All right, so we've got his little mouth on, and now let's work on his eyes. And actually, I'm gonna put his hat on first just so that I know where to put his eyes, because the hat does overlap just a bit on his head. So we're gonna just line that up with the shadow layer. You can see it matches exactly, so it's pretty easy to get it right where it should be. All right, and the next thing we're gonna do is put his tiny, teensy tiny little eyebrows on. These are so tiny as well. So I think how I'm gonna deal with this is put a little dab of glue where I want them. And I may have to grab tweezers for this. Those are some really tiny pieces. If you don't want to deal with that, you could just draw them on with a pen. All right, now we're ready to put his eyes on. So the way the eyes work, same thing. I'm just going to put a little dab of glue right at the top of my half circle on both sides. And then the round part goes at the top of the circle so that it overlaps and sticks up above the top. So let me show you that close up, like that. That's how you do the eyes. All right, whoa, what happened there? I must have bumped that. I do love liquid glue because this very reason. It gives you just a second to kind of manipulate things if you don't get them exactly right. Okay, let's get his eyes on. Now I did include a tiny white cut piece for his eyes. You could certainly use that. I'm actually just going to use a white pen to put little dots in his eyes. You could do whichever you want, but I think a pen might be just a bit easier than a tiny little circle. All right, and then we're going to put his nose on. His nose just runs right down the middle of his eyes. This piece looks like a little tic-tac to me. Okay, and then his mustache goes on, and like I said, his mustache is going to cover most of his mouth and nose, but I'm just going to grab a foam dot and use a foam dot on his mustache. That just kind of pops it up off of his face just a little, just like that. See, that was really not so bad. Okay, let's put his little hat layer on. So this piece has a cutout, so the darker color shows through, and that just goes right there. And then there's just a little decorative medallion that goes right here. All right, okay, so his little head is finished and he's starting to come together. Now let's move on to his clothes. So the pieces there, for the legs, there's going to be two pieces. One has holes and one doesn't. The one with holes goes on top, just like that, just mounted directly on it. Now when you're gluing something on top of glitter cardstock is a little tricky to adhere. It actually takes just a second for the liquid glue to seep into the glue crevices. So I always use liquid glue so that it can seep into those crevices. And then you have to use more glue than you normally would, and you have to wait just a minute for it to set. So those are my glitter tips. It does work, but some people get, overwhelmed by the glitter just because they're not quite sure how to use it. But you can glue glitter layers together. You just have to do it in a specific way. So we'll just set those aside to dry for a second and let the glue catch in all the little crevices. That glitter cardstock has kind of a rough finish, so that's why it doesn't immediately adhere. We'll set those aside. Then let's work on his little arms. So he's got the arm pieces go like this. Then he's got a layer that goes like this, and it matches up right at the top. And then there's one more piece, and this piece aligns at the bottom. So hopefully that makes sense. That way you've got some gold peeking out on the top, just like that. Sometimes it's helpful to just like lay things out before you glue anything down, just so that you're sure how things go together. And I think it makes you a little bit more confident when you do start gluing, because you've already figured it out. Okay, and then we'll just put this layer on. So see, once you've got all the pieces cut out, this really does go together really quickly. You could make a whole batch of these and have a little army of nutcrackers. All right, next let's work on his legs. So we're going to take these two leg pieces, and you can see how the dots are over to one side. They're not completely centered. So it's intended that the dots go kind of towards the outside of his legs. So this would be the correct way, with the dots that way and that way. But you could do it however you want. All right, I'm gonna get some glue on the back of this. And then this just gets layered on the black piece of his leg with the bottom of his shoes showing a little. So it is intended that some of the black shows through on that along the edges. And you also want his shoes to peek out along the bottom. So leave a little room on the bottom for those shoes to peek out. All right, just like that. And then let's get his little arms on. What do you guys think? Are you fans of the non-traditional Christmas color trend, or do you like traditional? I kind of like the non-traditional. I love the pink and mint, but I'll probably get tired of it and want to go back. Okay, let's put his little belt on. Again, I'm going to use as much glue as I can without it glopping out. The belt piece just goes like that, and then the little belt buckle, I actually just put glue on the two sides because that's where it's going to adhere. It's going to adhere to the black piece on the two sides. Just like that. Now, because we've got some dimension with these two layers of glitter, we actually need to use some foam dots to put his little coat on so that it will have some, have space to layer over those two little legs. Okay, just like that. And again, I'm just going to match up the back black piece really helps you. It's kind of like a shadow layer, and it really helps you know where to put everything. It is supposed to show on the legs, but on the top part of him, it doesn't really show. It just kind of helps guide you so you know where to place things. Now, you could add a couple of little gems here for buttons if you'd like, but actually his head is so big that it kind of covers up a lot of that. Okay, we're ready to get this put on our card. Now, my tip here would be to kind of lay everything out first to make sure you get the positioning right. So this is intended to be like a little stand like a Nutcracker would have. So just make sure that you kind of know spacing wise where to put everything. I think I need to shift this down just a little. Okay, that looks perfect. So I'm going to glue. I'm going to remember where that goes and glue this down. And then I'm going to put my Nutcracker body down. Okay, and now for the bobblehead. I got these little wobble springs off Amazon, and you'll find the link to these in the supply list. But it's basically just like a plastic spring in between two plastic caps that have adhesive on them. These are awesome. I think it was like $7 for 50 or something like that. So really inexpensive. And once you get a pack, you can just make a million of these. So you just peel off the adhesive, and we're going to put it right on the back of his bobblehead. And then we're just going to peel the other backing off. So now we've got a sticky side here, and this gets put right on the card. And it just kind of overlaps over his body a little bit, and you're just gonna place it and then push it down and let it catch into here. And then you've got a bauble. So fun. Okay, so there you go. There's two different versions of kind of a traditional Christmas and a funky non-traditional Christmas. So you can choose whatever colors you want. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy this project.